Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Two of the biggest brand names in basketball couldn't pry Dan Hurley away from his shot at history with UConn. And speaking of the Lakers, now what? And the Steelers made a move that should surprise exactly no one.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Dan Hurley believes in loyalty, clearly. Turns down the University of Kentucky, reportedly. Turns down the LA Lakers. He is staying at the University of Connecticut to try and chase a three-peat, chasing history, chasing John Wooden, and leaving a professional basketball team in LA stunned, shell-shocked, wondering where they're going to go next. We know where they're going to go next in stores. They're going to go chase a third title. Mark Zanetto from Locked On Huskies joins me now. And Mark, this was in some ways a surprising but not shocking sort of decision here. What do you think ultimately becomes the difference?
Ultimately, I think none of us in the UConn land really felt concerned. Although when Adrian Wojnarowski drops news, you tend to listen a little more, right? So, and also there's Adrian also wrote a book about Dan's father. So he has a really big family connection there. So there was a lot of smoke, right? So we took it seriously. The Kentucky news, not so much, right? So to us in UConn land or UConn Nation, I think the difference is it's hard to build up a culture and then be sold on an idea that you're going to come into a Lakers organization, which is known for its inability to have patience. And then suddenly it's going to do a juxtaposition where you don't have to draft a Bronny James, where you don't have to acquiesce to anything LeBron James says, where you're going to have full autonomy. And even though we're saying the right things, the compelling case was made, I truly believe that ultimately it's never was going to be about money. It was always going to be about, is this the right move for me in my career? And I don't think Dan Hurley thought it was the right move at the time.
And so, okay, I understand Stores is not exactly Hollywood, but this is a really good program right now, in part because he has restored it in a lot of ways to what it was under Jim Calhoun and for a long time when they were chasing national titles. We do expect a raise is coming, right? So
sure.
This is a little bit of a reversal, though, of what we've seen in football, where college coaches are going, we kind of don't want to do this. We don't want to deal with NIL. We don't want to deal with having to recruit guys twice. And so this could end up standing as an outlier in the college game right now, just given the way that this is all changing.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think what you have to understand and what people need to understand across the country is Dan Hurley is wired different. And if you don't know that yet, you should know that now. We all know it in Stores. We know it across the country of UConn followers. Dan Hurley is always looking for you to doubt him for the next challenge. It's like, oh, well, he's going to go to the Lakers. Nope, I'm not going to. Oh, he's not going to want to deal with the constant recruiting. I have to recruit people twice. I have to deal with NIL fundraising. I feel like he embraces that grind, right? And I think that's also a big reason why he stayed, because he built this up. Now he's just going to hand the keys over to a Kamani Young or a Luke Murray, although I'm sure he loves them dearly. They're his assistant coaches. I just couldn't see that happening with a loaded roster, right? I mean, this team is as talented as last year's team, if you can believe that. And it's truly going to be in the hunt for another national championship. If they weren't, maybe we're seeing a different tune. If you had a mass exodus, or they just couldn't get the transfers that they wanted or the recruits that they wanted. If they didn't get Liam McNeely, who's a 5-star top 10 recruit, maybe this is a different story. Maybe he is, in a press conference in LA. I don't think so, but maybe, possibly.
Stay up to date all year on the Connecticut Huskies by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On UConn on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, we'll try to figure out where the Lakers turn to now for their next head coach. Before we get to that, the Oilers look to even the Stanley Cup with the Panthers. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, and more. You can bet on all of it at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. Paul Skeens is on the mound again for the Pittsburgh Pirates as they travel to St. Louis to face the Cardinals. FanDuel likes the Pirates on the road and has their money line set at -132. FanDuel also has a prop on Skeens' performance. They have the over-under on outs recorded for the rookie phenom set at 17.5. I think I like the over there as the Cardinals are just getting over struggling against the lowly Rockies. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're catching this episode of Locked On Sports Today after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Can you get a statement win in a championship series? The Florida Panthers may have just done that to the Edmonton Oilers. Florida won Game 2 by a score of 4-1 after scoring not 1, not 2, but 3 goals in the final period. The Panthers outshot, outhit, and outpowerplayed the Oilers as they cruised to a dominating win with the series now headed to Edmonton. The only category the Oilers led in, penalties and penalty minutes. Connor McDavid will need to rally the troops to avoid going down 3-0 in this one. Over on the diamond, the Twins were looking to get off to a good start against the Rockies.
All right, man, finally back at home after 9 in a row on the road. Now they get 10 in a row back at home in the backyard at Target Field. Winners of 1 in a row, trying to make it 2 in a row, get some momentum back. Chris Paddock on the mound for this one. Third inning, Santana leads things off with a triple. Vasquez sac fly makes it 1-0. Next inning, Carlos Correa knocks in Royce Lewis. That makes it 2-0. And then in typical Twins fashion this year, and I know I've called this out on this show before, they score the most right at the end of the game. 3 in the 8th, Royce Lewis, another home run, Larnach with a sac fly. And that was pretty much all she wrote, man. Twins win at 5-0. They jump up to 35-31 on the year.
And the Giants began an interleague series with the Astros.
We're going to be getting into this overall road trip, where the Giants stand, the way that the National League is shaping out in the playoff race, and how it's like you got a bunch of parity, which is what we saw coming. So even though the Giants are 2 games under 500, they're like in a multiple way tie for a playoff spot, and they're really not even that far behind the number 1 wildcard spot. There's just a lot of parity right now in the National League, and the Giants are right in the thick of that. And just overall, after you lose the first 2 on the road trip, which extends your losing streak to 6 games, and then you end up going 3-3 and ultimately winning 3-3 on the trip and winning a series on the road against the defending World Series champions, you will take that. And so the Giants will take it. Obviously, this has happened to them several times this year. Happens to every team, probably multiple times a year, but that you have an opportunity to sweep and you're not able to do it. I would say that the injuries probably have a lot to do with that.
And Nelly Corda isn't the only woman on the LPGA Tour doing some things we've never seen before. Linnea Strom was in 52nd place heading into the final round of the LPGA ShopRite Classic. She shot a record-setting 60 in the final round, the lowest ever recorded in an LPGA final, and the biggest comeback since 1984. The biggest comeback before that was winning coming from 23rd place. So if the LA Lakers' next coach is not going to be Dan Hurley, who is it going to be? Andy Kamenetsky from Locked On Lakers joins me now. And Andy, we thought right before the Hurley news broke that this was JJ Redick's job to lose, that they were zeroing in. That was the phrasing from Shams Charania on JJ Redick. Are we just back to Redick status quo here?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, at this point, I think it's safe to say nobody quite knows what's happening moving forward, including, and most importantly, and most unfortunately, I imagine the Lakers. Yeah. Like, as far as, the names, JJ Redick, James Borrego, maybe Micah Nori, Sam Cassell, David Adelman. These are probably all the same names, but how they feel about the job moving forward, in particular, how JJ Redick, who heard leaks comparing him to Pat Riley, does he now think that was BS, trying to, spin him for a fan base that would have questions about bringing in a guy who's never coached anybody that I believe is older than 12 years old? Is it, how they sincerely felt, but all of a sudden they got transfixed by the opportunity with Dan Hurley? A little bit of column A, a little bit from column B, but either way, this is going to be, I think, awkward for a lot of central characters moving forward.
How does the first time coach of it all play into all of this? Because Darvin Ham, first time head coach, but at least he was an assistant coach for a long time, an assistant coach with a title in Milwaukee. And by the way, he's back in Milwaukee now as Doc Rivers' lead assistant. JJ Redick, as you mentioned, has never coached like anyone of consequence. So to the idea of needing to sell it, that seems like it was something that probably was real.
Yeah, I mean, look, I preface everything I'm about to say. I'm not looking to disparage JJ Redick. He is clearly a bright basketball mind. He is clearly very good at communicating his thoughts. He clearly has a lot of charisma. He has relationships all over the NBA, including obviously with his podcasting co-host LeBron James. He is somebody that earned a lot of respect in locker rooms. That's such a bizarre thing to say, I know, but it is true, Peter. I mean, he is actually the guy's podcasting partner. JJ Redick has credibility, but there is also an element of judging him purely on words and vibes. You know what I mean? Because there's no actual coaching track record to speak of. And that, by the way, doesn't mean that JJ Redick can't be a good coach. It doesn't mean that he can't be a good coach right away and hit the ground running. But it's still a very, very big leap of faith. It's a very big swing. And especially on the heels now of going after Dan Hurley, however truly close they were to this or not, it does start feeling reminiscent of the name syndrome that has sometimes plagued the Lakers. I think very often plagued the Lakers, but also too the concept of, do they actually know what they want in a coach? Do they know what they're looking for?
The turndown also seems relevant here. We have the reporting that this was a reportedly $70 million deal, pretty similar to ultimately what he goes back to Connecticut to get. It's hard not to see this happen. And look, he turned down Kentucky too. So we're talking about two of the preeminent basketball, forget pro, college jobs in the world. But it does make you wonder about the appeal of this job, doesn't it?
I mean, it's the Lakers, and I say that without any type of hint of Lakers exceptionalism, because right now that stock is at an all-time low. But it is still the Lakers. There's still a cachet to the organization. They're still one of the Tiffany brands in sports. But the reality is they've been a revolving door at coach. They were in the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago, and they won 47 games in a really difficult Western Conference that I'm not saying had Darvin Ham made all the right decisions, they would have been a 1 seed, but I think they could have won more games had Darvin Ham not taken so long to make some decisions that I think were plainly obvious. But this is still a pretty chaotic situation to step into as a coach. And if you look at, say, the 6 years, $70 million, the reported offer from Woj, ESPN, in a vacuum, that is a very respectable offer for Dan Hurley. But contextually, when you look at the idea that he has no pressing reasons whatsoever to leave UConn, a situation that he, by all accounts, is very happy, and he has the opportunity to try to make history with a three-peat. It's something that hasn't happened since the days of John Wooden. Mm-hmm. You need to make him a Godfather offer. Like, you need to make him not one of the top 5 or 6 paid coaches annually in the league. He needs to be the highest paid. And I don't say that because it necessarily would have made it so Hurley couldn't say no. He might have said no anyway. But optically, if you're this organization that cannot seem to land a coach who lasts more than 3 years to save its life, you need to make sure that optically you have every single base covered and that nobody could possibly criticize the offer as anything remotely unserious. And to me, the offer, even as strange as it is to say 6 years, 70 million is unserious, to me, it was unserious. It was, you're willing to go 75%, but not all the way. Would it have made a difference? I have no idea. I think Dan Hurley would have been legitimately tough to pry away from UConn. But if I'm the Lakers, I want to feel like I put every single thing on the table and made this the most impossible decision to say no to. And I don't think they went far enough in that regard. And again, given the context of they can't land on a coach, I think those are optics they can't afford.
Keep up with the Lakers coaching search by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Lakers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, Mike Tomlin will be staying in Pittsburgh for a little while longer, and that is to be expected. The Pittsburgh Steelers may not have been a playoff power for 7 years now. Regardless, they extended the contract of head coach Mike Tomlin for another 3 seasons. As Locked On Steelers host Chris Carter points out, it shouldn't be surprising.
This is a move that should surprise no one if you were watching or listening to this podcast, because as I said a while ago, this was a done deal. This was something that was going to happen. The Steelers, this was something that was kind of an afterthought, not that something the Steelers had to really negotiate too hard, not something that Tomlin had to negotiate too hard. They were going to get this done as soon as everything else was in the clear. And like, you know, people were bringing this up back in February and March and April. And I'm like, guys, they got free agency. They got the draft. They got all these other things to worry about. They got to get the rookies ready. They got to get the OTAs ready. And now here we are the day before minicamp, and Mike Tomlin has signed an extension. But let's talk about this extension. So this is now a thing. Art Rooney released a statement. Mike Tomlin's leadership is quote from Steelers president Art Rooney II. Mike Tomlin's leadership and commitment to the Steelers have been pivotal to our success during his first 17 years as head coach. Extending his contract for 3 more years reflects our confidence in his ability to guide the team back to winning playoff games and championships while continuing our tradition of success. Saying he's also appreciative. Mike Tomlin saying he's appreciative for the contract extension and that he's continuing to work diligently to get back to where we belong, sustain playoff success within the ultimate goal of winning the franchise's 7th Lombardi trophy. But right there in those responses, in quotes, is playoff success, which the Steelers have not had for 7 straight years. And I know there's a lot of people who's talking about, well, why would you give this guy any sort of extension if you want to have playoff success, if you tie the playoff success to Mike Tomlin? And that is the issue right there. And this is something that I talk about a lot here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, as well as the North Shore Drive podcast that I do with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and anywhere that you see my work. Mike Tomlin certainly has his flaws. There's times where maybe he should have called a timeout, that he shouldn't have called a timeout. There's times where maybe the challenge wasn't the best challenge. But by and large, he is respected across the game of football as one of the best coaches in the NFL, not just by Steelers fans, not just by random people in national media like Rich Eisen, who people want to get mad at whenever the Steelers lose one game, but also by players and coaches. And when you hear other coaches talk about Mike Tomlin, like people say Sean McVay is one of the great young minds of the NFL, and he's one of the guys that's guiding it in the direction that it should be. And when you ask him who's one of the coaches that he looks up to, he says Mike Tomlin first off the top of his head.
It isn't surprising. And that's because the media and the players love Mike Tomlin. But if you just look at the numbers, it is a little surprising. The Pittsburgh Steelers have not won a playoff game since 2017. Have not won a playoff game. The 500 mark or better streak is nice. But that's not the standard in Pittsburgh. Super Bowls are the standard. And it does make me wonder if early in Mike Tomlin's career, they hadn't won, what we'd be talking about now. Because since 2010, when they lost to the Packers in the Super Bowl, the wins that the Pittsburgh Steelers have in the postseason are against Matt Moore, A.J. McCarron, and Alex Smith. That's it. That's it. And that is a pretty broad swath of time when they had Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell. TJ Watt is turning 30. Like, he has not had a real shot at an AFC, and he's been one of the 3 or 4 best defensive players in football basically since he walked into the NFL. Are we just entirely sure Tomlin is the elite coach that he's been billed for 15 plus years? Because over those 15 plus years, the Steelers have underperformed. They have not held the standard in Pittsburgh, which is championships. They haven't even been close. Mike McCarthy was fired in 2018 from the Green Bay Packers after a disastrous season. He has more wins in the playoffs since then as Mike Tomlin, and he took a year off. And then Dak broke his leg, and the Cowboys essentially took a year off. They've won more playoff games than Mike Tomlin. Think about how the narratives on those two coaches are different. And finally, Scotty Scheffler won again. Yes, I know the sky is blue, but listen to this. The gap in world golf ranking points between Scheffler and Rory McIlroy, who is world number 3. He's the number 3 ranked player in the world. That gap is a chasm. How big, you might be asking? Well, it's the same as the gap between McIlroy and the number 613th ranked player in the game, Anthony Quayle. So yeah, Rory's in 3rd, but like, he's not even close to Scotty Scheffler. Scotty is really just that good. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, there are some big storylines to monitor in the NFL as we head to mini camps. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.